Welcome back to a new section of this course about how to use databases in PHP code. So in the last couple of episodes, we talked about how we can insert and manipulate data inside a database. And in this episode, I want to focus on how we could access our database directly from our website. So let's create a new folder and call it projects or project. And inside our project folder, let's create an index.php. And let's create HTML markup by writing down doc, hit tab. Let's save it and refresh the browser. And let's open our folder project. What we do not want to do with our connection is to put it right inside of our index.php, so inside of our body tags. But we want to create a new file that stores our database connection. So let's create a new folder and call it includes inside our project folder, of course. And inside our includes folder, let's create a new file and let's name it database.php. Let's create opening and closing PHP tags. If you're only going to use PHP code inside a file, it's not necessary to add a closing PHP tag, but for the sake of this video, I will do it. So in order to connect to a database, we need 4 params. So let's create a new variable and let's call it dbHost. Set it equal to double quotes and a semicolon. So let's copy paste it 4 times. And let's change the name of the second one to dbUser. We also need a dbPass and we need a dbName. Now we need to fill in the values. So inside the double quotes of our dbHost, we need to write down the host name. And since we are using a localhost server, the name is localhost. But you actually need to be aware that if you are using a web server to upload documents, you actually need to change it to whatever your host is. So let me add a comment. Let's say params to connect to a database. And let me zoom in. All right. So inside the double quotes of dbUser, we need to write down the username. And since we are using XAMPP, the default username is root. The password needs to be empty because we don't have a password. The default password in XAMPP is empty. So if you actually have created a password somewhere, you need to fill it in right here. But I will keep it empty because, well, I don't have a password. And if you are using an online server as well, you need to add a password, otherwise it won't work. In the variable dbName, the value needs to be the name of the database that we created. And if you remember, I called mine PHP tutorial. And if you used another name, you need to use the name that you gave to your database because, well, PHP tutorial won't work for you, of course. So now that we have created our params, we need to create our database connection. So let's create a variable called con of connection and set it equal to a PHP function called MySQL I_connect. And you probably might wonder what the I is after MySQL, and the I stands for improved. Well, if I remove it, you can see that the color is still green and they accomplish the same thing. But MySQL I supports some things that the old MySQL does not. So things like prepared statement, multiple statements, or transactions. And I know that you haven't heard of these before, but you will later on. So I always recommend you to use MySQL I because it's simply an improved version. So let me add a comment, connection to database. So inside the parentheses, we need 4 params. And, well, we actually create the 4. So let's copy paste them inside our parentheses and separate them with a colon. We also need... Keep in mind that this is the order that you need to write them inside your connection. And, well, it's the same order that we created our params. So let's go to our index.php and at the top of our page, let's create PHP opening and closing tags and let's require once the folder includes /database.php, and that's ended with a semicolon. So right now in our body tag, we have access to the variable con, which is the connection of our database. And whenever we need to connect to the database, we just need to refer to the variable con. Well, let's actually go back to the database.php, and right below my connection, I want to create an if statement because, well, I want to see if the connection actually exists. So let's say that if variable con, and if it's true, we don't want to do anything. But else, so if there's not a connection, I want to use a function called die. And let's add some text. And let's say database connection failed. And later on, you will see why this is important to do, because we won't get an error message right now, but whenever we are not connected, you can see that the database connection failed message will be printed out on the screen. Thank you for watching this episode, and I will be seeing you in the next one.